Nice Micro Monday. Why is almost everyone wrong about the Linus Tech Tips Linux Daily Driver Challenge? So, if you are like me and enjoy watching some Linux related content on YouTube, then you might have come across all these videos in which Linux YouTubers are discussing the latest Linus Tech Tips challenge, in which popular tech YouTuber Linus Sebastian and one of his friends Luke are trying to switch to Linux, and they share their experience, share their opinions, and of course a lot of people are discussing this even on the infamous Reddit website and have these very spicy memes about it. But I would think that most people have quite bad takes on it, and most people don't really consider a lot of important aspects of this challenge and why it is going the way it is going. And while I will discuss in today's video how those people are wrong, watch until the end, where I will share you my own experience or my own kind of explanation, my own analogy on how to understand this situation. And then if you've seen that, you can tell me if you think I'm wrong. So first of all, let's just address the people who were really optimistic about this challenge, as they have already been proven quite wrong. So there is this demographic in the so-called Linux community or the Linux user base who are very passionate about evangelizing about Linux, and they think that gaming is one of the aspects that has to be really good on Linux if you want to reach a better user percentage. They call it market share, but whatever. And these people usually play games on Linux and have been playing for a while, and as they will thank Valve and their efforts with Steam and with the play on Linux with Proton and things like that, that it is much better to play games on Linux nowadays than it was like 5 years ago. And I personally have no idea how that thing is going, as I really don't have a high opinion on the producers of these AAA games, so I just avoid them everywhere. And so I don't really care about that aspect. But those people who are kind of very optimistic, as the gaming experience on Linux got really astronomically better than it was, and they are very satisfied with how they can play the games on their system. So they were expecting that Linus Tech Tips will also just come to the same conclusion, that gaming will be just super good, and then all the people, all the millions of subscribers of the channel will just see Linus have such a great time playing games on Linux that everyone will just suddenly switch to Linux, which well, as you might have seen, did not really happen. And as I just said, they've been proven wrong, as both Linus and Luke are facing strange bugs and strange issues in the operating system and the programs running on this operating system. And so, of course, there are people who try to justify that by, oh, they should have read the error messages, they should have searched for solutions before trying this and that, they should have updated, they should have looked up this or that. And, I guess to some degree that's right. It never hurts to be more prepared for something radical you are trying to do. But of course, there are the people who will just tell you that, well, the operating system should at least, guide your hand, and we should, or at least not be actively sabotaging you using your system, which is a valid point. So what they will just picture the people who were criticizing Linus of being, not smart enough to use Linux or whatever their rationale was. Like they paint a picture like these people would just say like, no, you cannot just take new user feedback seriously, they don't know anything. And like the morally high ground is on the people who will just say, oh, no, we really have to listen to them, because the experience they are having, that's the same experience other people will have, and we want this experience to be good, so we want this operating system to be a little more friendly to the newcomers. But I think what this specific meme gets wrong is that Linus's setup is nothing like the average new Linux user would be using. So they have all these hardware they racked up throughout the years that they use for production of their YouTube content, and they use these very specific tools And when they bought those very expensive things, they didn't really care if the hardware manufacturer supports Linux or not. And, well, you know, on a computer you have the kernel, and the kernel is the part which kind of translates what you want to do to the hardware. So the kernel is kind of the bridge between the software and the hardware. And so if the kernel is not told how to handle the specific hardware by the hardware manufacturer, then the kernel cannot do anything. And of course, you know, you can find like third-party tricks and tips and workarounds to make some of these things working. And this is what Linus is also talking about in one of his videos, like what a strange workaround he had to go through just to get, I think, his mouse customized properly. But, you know, this is kind of something a lot of new users who are not technically inclined will not run into, because they won't really care about having like a very specific mouse or a very specific audio board or whatever. And the people usually who have those, I think we could have like at least the expectation that they are a little more technically inclined and can look up if those hardware is available to work on Linux. And of course, it is a very difficult situation when you just never really thought about it. I have a not that bad, but similar situation with my NVIDIA card, because, you know, relative to my budget on consumer electronics, I spent significant amount of money on graphics card before I became free software conscious, so to speak, and now I am stuck with a hardware in my computer that is only has proprietary drivers, and at least it works. So, but you know, if I was a real free software zealot, should I just pull it out from my computer, throw it away, and buy a new one that has like an open source driver? I don't think it's we cannot really expect that from people, and the same kind of thing might be valid for the thing how Linus's and Luke's experience with their specific setups went. And of course, they are not really using the system to like everyday things like streaming a game, and I don't know, like live streaming in general is not like I know a lot of people do that nowadays. It's like a whole new thing. I do it sometimes, but it's not like everyone is doing that. But anyways, so this is kind of the part what I of the bad takes. Let's go and let's see a good take I kind of found. And well, this is Scott Williams guy. It's a very, very, very amazing thread. It gets these things very right. Like, why don't us long-time Linux users start live streaming ourselves trying to install and use Windows and macOS, and highlighting all the annoying things as we go. We can all be like, you have to install how many .NET Framework versions? How many reboots so far? And like, problem with macOS is that the hardware support is just so bad. I couldn't get to run it on any of my Raspberry Pis, no matter how many proprietary drivers I tried to install from random sites on the internet. Wait, I can't even log in with a Microsoft account? How do people put up with this? Stuff like this, why people will never take Windows seriously. All this public fighting between Windows and macOS users is confusing and overwhelming, and a big turnoff for Linux users who might otherwise consider a proprietary operating system. This is a genius take. This is a very good take. As someone who's been working with computers for a very long time, Linus has all his little habits and pet peeves that are totally based on kind of the Windows ways of doing things. And of course, he has a very hard time adjusting his thing to a different type of doing things. And I just said in the last video that I recorded near the creek on what is Linux, that basically Linux is very different. It's fundamentally different than the proprietary operating systems, because it is not developed by one single entity pursuing one single vision, which I don't know what the single vision in case of Microsoft is, but anyways, on Linux you have all these independent parts that are developed independently, but are developed in a way that they can be put together into a very good operating system, to be honest. And this is how we have to consider. And my example would be that, like, you know, you can have when you are trying to get from somewhere to another place. Maybe you have been driving like a regular gas car all your life, and now you have to switch to a Tesla, which is an electric car. And then if you can drive, you will probably able to be driving well, except for, filling it up with gas. You will have to fill it up with electricity, and, you can probably run much higher distances on gas than on the electricity or the energy stored in those batteries, but it's still a car. And I think switching to Linux from Windows is not like that. It's totally different. It's more akin to, like when you were maybe living in a countryside and always drove your car everywhere, but suddenly you moved to a city where it's just traffic jams everywhere, and it's objectively the public transport is better than driving. Maybe it would take you even longer to get to your workplace in the rush hour in the morning using a car, and you are much faster taking the bus, taking the subway, which is, in well-designed modern cities, that is a possibility. And if you have been a car person all your life and just one day just decide, okay, from today I'm going to take the public transport because I'm just fed up always sitting in the congested, the traffic congestion, so I'm just gonna take the bus, but I don't look up where the bus stop is, I don't look up the bus schedule, I don't know where the bus lines go, and I just get out of my house and where is the bus? This is kind of the different mindset that would Linux require, is some kind of akin to that switching from driving a car to taking the public transport. You have to adjust your techniques. Maybe on a car you just used your GPS to get from one point to another. Well, now you're taking the bus, so maybe you will have to install the public transport application on your phone to find which bus you should take and where you should transfer to the subway and things like that. And you have the expensive equipment analogy. Maybe you have a very expensive a sound system built in your car, and now you're annoyed that you cannot use that sound system on the bus. Well, that's a bus, you cannot use your sound system there, of course. This is, I think, how we should approach switching to Linux. And I just recently I'm totally in the Joe Collins camp of how to switch to Linux, even though Joe Collins would never switch to Arch from Windows like I did. Never suggest. I wouldn't suggest to anyone that either in general, but Joe Collins is the one who says that you should not switch to Linux, you should slowly migrate to Linux. Maybe just get a computer, get an old laptop you're not using, and just install Linux on it, try out, see how it works, get used to it, and decide to install it on your main machine once you are comfortable with it. Maybe just check out what software is available on it, check out what hardware you can use on it. And in the software case, you have a lot of free software on Linux, of course, and a lot of those programs you will be able to find for Windows. So before you switch the operating system, you can just try out which of the free software alternatives you prefer, and then when you will move to Linux, you will know instantly what you will want to install. And this is kind of what I would say. And this, for a lot of the very basic users who just want a browser, want to be able to watch movies on their computer, and maybe sometimes use a webcam to, I don't know, talk to someone. Most of the I think Zoom works from the browser. I think WebEx works from the browser. These are the ones I had some experience with, unfortunately. So most of those people will probably have no serious issues with Linux. The people who use their computer, even editing your slideshows and documents, you will LibreOffice will probably be good enough for you. And if you want to do more specific things like video editing or those things, you can always, of course, look up the free software alternatives in Windows first and figure out how to use them, how to adapt to that workflow instead of just jumping into a totally new experience without being prepared for it. And I really don't think that it is a good attitude that we have to make Linux an operating system that is like 100% easy to use for Windows users. I don't really think that's possible. I don't really think that's desirable. I can agree that we can use feedback from people like the Linus Tech Tip guys to make the transition process for people more streamlined. That is, I think, a good goal to pursue. And but we cannot get away from educating the users if they want to make the switch, because unfortunately most of the hardware still comes with proprietary operating systems for some reason. I guess the reason is money. Yeah, I guess nice Macro Monday. Subscribe, tell me how I'm wrong, like the video, follow me on Mastodon. I have a Mastodon account you should be looking at right now. And also give me money on Patreon if you would like to support my efforts on doing hot takes on the internet, I guess. And I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.